Yeah, how do you like that? This is Brian Ward welcoming you to another episode of the Arkham Sessions. With me, as always, we have the psychologist to the superheroes, the superheroines, and the supervillains, Dr. Andrea Letamendi.
Hello, how are you?
I am doing pretty well. How are you?
I'm doing well.
Good.
It's going to be a howl of a good time.
Yeah, it will be. Nice. I like the pun this week. That was good.
Did that work?
Yeah, it worked really well. This week, we might be in the middle of November, but I see no reason why we shouldn't just go right back to that October 31st feeling, since we're dealing with werewolves this week. What about you?
I feel like we just dealt with somewhat of a werewolf with last week's episode, Tigress.
Kind of.
But I guess we're continuing on the beasts. We're continuing to talk about humanoid, furry, wolf-like, beast-like creatures that tackle Batman. So I'm all for it.
And they sometimes literally tackle Batman. So
that's what I meant.
yeah. Oh, okay. Well, then as long as that's what you meant, we're all good. Yeah. It's a pretty good week for us, I know, because not only do we get to talk about werewolves, but we also get to talk about our good friend, Mr. Len Wein.
That's right. He wrote this episode.
He did.
In 92.
Yeah. And it was based on his comic book that was even earlier. So I like the idea of them bringing back original writers to adapt their own stories, because who knows the stories better? And when you've got a guy who's literally a comic book legend like Len Wein, we know him, of course, through having created Swamp Thing. He also is the man responsible for creating Wolverine. One of the nicest guys you could possibly meet. I'm excited that they brought a guy like him on board to write for Batman the Animated Series.
Yeah, it's a well-written episode. It's certainly in that horror genre, which is kind of cool. And, I said last week that Tiger, which was the name of last week's episode, was very unique and a bit more fantastical compared to most Batman the Animated Series episodes. This one is also somewhat unique in that it has this, it has this mysteriousness, this, more mythical, more, I would say it's definitely more out of the box than your typical crime-related Batman animated series episode.
It sort of harkens back to the old sort of horror comics.
Yeah.
Which I like. And I like that Len seems to have a really good handle on those types of stories, especially with having created and dealt with Swamp Thing for so many years. He's a good guy to be writing stories like this. And, I think we should basically get right into it. We're, of course, talking about Moon of the Wolf, which aired November 11th, 1992. As we mentioned, it was written by Len Wein, and it was directed by Dick Sebast, who actually gets a little bit of a cameo in this episode. At one point, we see a building with Sebast, right
good
above
catch.
it. Yeah, it was a nice little throwback to this episode's director. We actually start out very similar to the way we started out last week. We see it's nighttime, and we are looking at a rather familiar red-headed zoo security guard.
Oh, he's not going to last long.
Who may have actually been the zoo security guard from last week. I don't know. Because if we remember, Selena Kyle was looking at the tiger, and a red-headed security guard is thrown into the tiger habitat as she is whisked away by an ape man. In this particular case, a red-headed zoo security guard. This time he's given a name. His name is John Hamner. He is walking his dog. Now, he doesn't appear to be in the zoo. Yeah, this might be like...
No, it looks like it's the park. It's like Gotham Park.
This might be his off hours. He's walking his dog. His dog begins to growl, and we then get to see what he's growling at. A large, hulking, gray beast of a man looking very similar to a werewolf. He attacks and seems to have it out for John. Now, something that I did find interesting, and I find it particularly interesting that Len wrote this episode, because the first thing that the werewolf does is pick up the dog and throw him. Mm-hmm. And the dog hits the ground hard, but then gets up, whimpers, and runs away. Mm-hmm. Well, I find that a little shocking, because I don't know of a bigger dog lover than Len Wein. So for him to have written in a moment where a dog might be put into some kind of jeopardy is a little shocking to me.
Well, you'll notice that the dog is able to walk away, so maybe that was some kind of concession. He survives.
That's true.
But you're right. That's an interesting observation.
And the red-headed John Hamner is put into jeopardy. That is until...
If it's a fight you're looking for, try starting one with me.
That's right. Batman comes in to save the day as usual. Now, something that I think is unique to this particular episode, and it's very Len Wein, is that Batman is a little more jovial toward this werewolf in general. He, throughout the episode, calls him various names. In this particular case, he calls him Harry. He's like... The masquerade's over, Harry. And later on, he's referring to the wolf hairs that he pulls during this struggle, and tells Alfred that the wolf hairs check out, but it could just mean that Shaggy is wearing an elaborate mask. Like he's basically a Bruce Wayne / Batwoman that we've never seen before. He kind of has a little bit of a sense of humor, particularly as it relates to this giant beast.
Maybe he has this condescending approach toward him. Maybe because this wolf thing isn't human, that he kind of looks down on him. Yeah. Therefore, the name calling.
Well, I also think that there's a little bit of an interesting moment here, because we're going to step outside of the episode for a moment simply to acknowledge... Yes, we know that we are talking about a cartoon series. We know that every episode is going to be unique and standalone, and it's not necessarily going to follow the continuity of previous episodes. However, this is our 43rd episode, and he has dealt with Man-Bat. Just last week, he actually saw Dr. Langstrom again, who was, of course, Man-Bat. And they went up against Langstrom's old colleague when they dealt with Tigress, who was also a man creature of some kind. Now, I find something to be a little amusing, which is that when he goes to... Commissioner Gordon to tell him that he fought this person, he actually says...
Just tangled with a mugger in a werewolf mask.
What?
Right.
That clearly was not human.
Right. And he couldn't get the werewolf mask off of him. And he couldn't, I'm surprised that Batman isn't more willing to accept the idea that he is fighting a supernatural creature at this point. Because he's done it a couple of times already. And they typically are much larger than he. They are typically much stronger than he, and this werewolf figure seemed to be both of those. So Commissioner Gordon basically says that he is unaware of anyone doing this sort of thing, and Batman actually says as he's leaving,
"Just had a disturbing thought, that's all. What if that guy wasn't wearing a mask?"
I like that he actually has to be discussing it with Gordon to be the first time that he actually considers that it's possible it might be a real Wolfman.
Was he loading a gun?
No, he was actually putting the hairs that he took into his bat belt.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah, so it was an interesting moment where for a moment he's actually coming around. Like, hey... maybe this guy is the real deal. I'm surprised it took him so long. But, it's... maybe he's just tired.
Well, deductive reasoning can take some time, especially if you're experiencing stress.
At this point, especially after having gone up against Tigress in the last episode. We don't know what stage of recovery Selena is in yet. Presumably she is back to normal, but we don't know. We haven't seen her in this episode. So it's quite possible that my first instinct would be, the Dr. Moreau character is back.
Right.
Oh no, this is a revenge plot. Somebody is out to get me with a Wolfman. And, it wouldn't necessarily be, hey, I'm going to jump on your back and try to rip your mask off. But this is a new episode. It's a new episode, and Batman has to be shocked, I guess, when we find out that he is, in fact, a real werewolf. But that actually takes a little bit of time, because even when he is examining the hairs with Alfred there in the room, he's still a little hesitant to jump right in.
The hairs check out as genuine wolf hair, but it could mean only that Shaggy was wearing an extremely fancy mask.
So yeah, once again, he more name calling, and he's still not on board with the idea that even though these wolves' hairs are legit, that this guy might actually be a wolfman.
Look, the guy constructed a very elaborate, realistic wolf mask using authentic, genuine Alaskan timber wolf hairs.
Yeah.
It's totally possible.
Yeah. Well, so who is this guy? Well, it turns out we know who he is. We have actually seen him previously in the episode when he turns back into himself from his werewolf persona. The man's name is Romulus, Anthony Romulus, and he is probably the biggest Olympian athlete that Gotham has ever seen. He's very wealthy. He's received gold medal after gold medal, and he's basically the guy who just couldn't be beat in the various games. Well, how did he reach that level of victory, Drea?
Well, he made a deal with someone, essentially.
The devil.
Close.
Oh.
This scientist named Milo.
Oh, Dr. Milo. And what is it that Dr. Milo provided for him?
Dr. Milo created this serum, which combined Alaskan timberwolf estrogen and steroids, like actual steroids.
Yeah.
So the idea is that the serum is undetectable, unlike steroids, and that it can lead to, superhuman. It's basically another performance enhancing drug, but one that is superior to steroids.
Well, in this particular case, you drink it, apparently, because as he's explaining that it has not been tested before on human beings, Romulus actually takes the vial, drinks it. I mean, I would instantly think maybe injection or something like that, like other PEDs.
Right, that would be quicker.
But no, he drinks it and immediately feels better, stronger. And he, in fact, goes and wins all of these competitions at what is presumably the Olympics or the World Games, something along those lines, and becomes a celebrity, gets his cereal endorsements and what have you, but refuses to pay Dr. Milo. He believes that he did it all on his own, which one might actually attribute to steroids, because steroids do often throw out these mood swings in the people who are taking the drugs. So you might actually think, it could be PEDs, could be some sort of HGH, human growth hormone, or it could be other types of steroids that's just shifting this guy into a more moody, angry type person. But Dr. Milo will not be deterred. He wants his payment, and he's not really specified what that payment is, but he seems to be okay with the idea that he's not getting money. Meanwhile, he's watching this hulk of a man go and win every competition. And he's a little smug. So we find out that he kind of has Romulus under his control a little bit, not in a mind control sort of way or anything Mad Hattery or anything like that. This is basically, he is holding the antidote to this serum hostage. Why? Because this serum is giving Romulus lycanthropy, essentially.
I can't reverse the process, but I can complete it. What you're suffering from, my friend, is an early stage of lycanthropy, more commonly known as werewolfism. For that, I have no treatment. However, advanced werewolfism can be cured.
So there are different levels of werewolfism. There's like mid-stage level where you're kind of grown hair and you're not in the clear, but that's not curable. But if you're full-blown werewolf, that's curable?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, he basically says, look, there's another vial that you have to take that will kick it up a notch, and you will become a full-blown werewolf, and that I can actually handle. So don't you worry.
Well, and I think we had to be clear that Romulus is suffering. He's probably, more willing to comply with anything Dr. Milo says because these states that he goes into are very distressing and uncomfortable, and he essentially realizes that he does not want to be half werewolf or full werewolf or have anything to do with this. So he's willing to do anything that Dr. Milo says.
Yeah, he's in a lot of pain, and he makes it clear that he wants the antidote. He wants it reversed. Well, even after he drinks the second vial, he is told, I just made you a full werewolf, and I can't do anything about it, but you're going to be my guy. Like, you're going to be, you're going to basically kill the Batman. The idea that Dr. Milo has is that he wants to use Anthony Romulus as a way to, A, capture the Batman, and B, kill the Batman. So what does he do? He actually has Romulus give a statement to the press, which is that he will double his payment, his donation to one of Bruce Wayne's charities if and only if...
I'll give $2.5 million to the Gotham United Fund, provided the Batman comes to the house personally to pick up the check.
Because, of course, Batman can't not go and do this thing. He shows up to Romulus's place, and he wants to get the check, and he's basically like, can we just get on with this? And Romulus is writing the check, closes the doors, which lock, and then Batman doesn't quite feel right. It's getting a little hot in here. What could that mean?
Of course. Gas.
It's always gas.
Why wasn't he prepared for that, though?
Batman gets captured a lot. He's not a very good hero in that regard.
He knew, when he walked into that, when we see him in the scene, he is visibly uncomfortable. He's suspicious. He doesn't like the guy. He's just like, give me the money and let me get out of here. So I'm a little shocked that he wasn't prepared for, fire, gas, water, guns, whatever the guy had up his sleeve.
Well, I guess you don't necessarily suspect such a high-profile athlete to be the guy who's going to take you down.
Look, anyone with that unibrow is definitely up to something.
It is quite suspicious. He's got hair in places he probably shouldn't have it. So, he is and he's a very big guy. I mean, if I were going to suspect someone maybe of turning into a werewolf, that guy could be the guy.
So do you think unibrowism is a symptom of lycanthropy?
Sure.
Okay.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Anybody, hey folks, let this be a word of warning to you. This is a public service announcement. If you see anyone on the street with a unibrow, werewolf. Go ahead, run away. Don't even talk to those people. Werewolf. You heard it here first. And probably last. So Batman is captured, dating back to the Batman 66 days, where every single episode ended with him strapped to some elaborate machine. Batman is chained, and once again, just like last week with Tiger, the good doctor wants to see what his creation can do.
I want all the creature's savagery unleashed on the Batman.
Creepy.
Yeah.
He wants to see this werewolf tear Batman to shreds. and maybe for no other reason than just to do it. I want to talk for a second about Dr. Milo, because this guy creeps me out even more than some of our previous mad scientists. This guy seems to have no remorse. He seems to have no legitimate connection to even Romulus. He's basically just using him as a puppet. And he basically has this this notion of, look, you can't screw me over. I know I've got the upper hand. Here's what you're going to do for me. And, I want you to see you destroy the Batman. And I get the sense that he'd probably sit there and watch.
Yeah, he's, clearly he lacks empathy and compassion for other people. He took advantage of Romulus. Now, I don't know that I don't like Romulus. I'm not very fond of Romulus, but
Sure.
But Milo certainly took advantage of him and saw something in Romulus that he could manipulate or that he could take advantage of. He knew that Romulus was an overachiever. He knew he was focused solely on winning, and Dr. Milo wanted to tap into that, and I think that he manipulated Romulus into drinking the serum.
Oh, please, spare me the melodrama.
Yeah, that's kind of his attitude. he's not having it.
No.
He throws a little. What is the new term for the kids today? He's throwing shade pretty frequently toward Romulus.
I don't know that that's throwing shade.
No, maybe he's not.
I think he's just being. I think he's just showing his narcissism, his sense of, he has this sense of grandiosity, and he's interested in destroying other people. I know to throw shade, I mean, this is totally a side
yes,
comment.
educate me.
But to throw shade means you're kind of deliberately putting someone down. You're specifically you're electing to put someone down. And I think Dr. Milo is just way above it. He's not bothering to throw shade. He's just lost in his own narcissism and in his own destructive ways.
Right. Well, let's talk about narcissism a little more as it relates to Romulus here. What kind of a guy, before we continue into the more fantastic elements of this episode with a full-blown werewolf going up against Batman, talk a little bit about Romulus and what it takes for a person to need to win enough that he seeks out Milo and goes for these performance-enhancing drugs.
Well, certainly the aspect of taking an enhancer, like something like steroids, that's not completely uncommon. We know, there are a lot of athletes that will go down that path and will take steroids. There's a significant percentage, that will take it further and further to a place where it's certainly destructive and to a place where it's addictive, right? And I think that with Romulus, it's as if he's trying to, he sought out Milo, right? He wanted to find that perfect, undetectable, superpower, and he found it.
You wanted something that would guarantee a gold medal, and I gave it to you.
Exactly. And when it comes to performance, and let's talk about performance for a little bit. When it comes to performance, there are some interesting psychological findings. Our success, like our ability to do well physically, in sports, what athletes do in the Olympics, there are some important internal and external factors that will influence how well we do or how poorly we do. And some of this research goes back, over 100 years ago around what, those factors are. Have you heard of the benefits of anxiety and arousal when it comes to performance?
I'm just going to guess can't be good. Can't when you're anxious about performing, arousal might have issue. No, that's not what we're talking about.
No, you're wrong.
Okay. Oh, okay.
As always, you're wrong. Well, there's something called the Yurk's Dodson effect. Over 100 years ago, when psychology
It would have to be over 100 years ago that you have someone named Yurk Dodson.
No, those are two people.
Oh, okay.
Robert Yerkes and John Dillingham Dodson.
Oh, Dillingham. There you go. That's over 100 years ago for sure.
So 100 years ago, in the infancy of psychological science, these two scientists basically put mild electric shocks on rats to see if that would motivate them to get through mazes faster. And what's interesting is they found that the electric shocks, when they became too strong, of course, the rats would scurry around in random directions to escape, and it wasn't helpful. But the experiment demonstrated that increasing stress and arousal levels could actually help focus motivation and attention on the particular task, in this case, navigating a maze, but only to a certain point. So what they found is that there's this optimal level of stress that will actually help you focus on, an exam, a performance, a physical sport, something like that. And it will actually help you to do well, to do better.
I guess that makes sense.
But again, remember that it's this balance. It's kind of like a sweet spot.
Okay.
If you have too much anxiety or arousal, then your cognitive abilities become impaired. You're not performing at your maximum potential. You're confused, disoriented, distracted. You don't have that executive functioning, in place. So your performance goes down. Another aspect of that is if you don't have any arousal or any...
Look, it doesn't make you a bad person, all right? It's perfectly normal.
Well, when it comes to performance...
And there's no executive functioning.
When it comes to performance, it actually does impact how well people do, in that it's that level of... It's almost like when you're uninspired or bored. I think of it that way, that you're not going to do your best. And they also found that there's this increased performance based on level of competition. So if you're, say, at the gym and there's a dude next to you also pumping iron, you're going to pump harder and you're going to pump more weight because there's that level of competition. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. Does the same apply to not necessarily competition, but also maybe peacocking, maybe trying to...
That's essentially it.
So it's also, it's not necessarily that you're competing with the person next to you, but say an attractive woman is pumping iron next to me. I might decide to pump iron even better than ever, and I might go up a couple of pounds just to be that much more impressive, that sort of thing.
Well, that would be a different factor. That would be attention, or that would be like an audience. And some people actually perform better with an audience because it increases arousal to that optimal level.
So in the case of Romulus, who is in a stadium full of people and loves the adoration, he loves having these cereal deals and things like that. This guy might actually be manipulated by that heightened arousal.
Right. And again, I want you to think about the complexity of the factors that influence performance, the internal and external factors. So internal factors could be things like, sure, arousal and anxiety, but they could also be things like how much you've trained, your diet, your nutrition, your level of sleep, your level of stress, all these things, right? That also includes the level of performance enhancers that you're putting into your body. External factors have to do with, anything related to the sport or the competition, things we talked about, like, is there an audience? Is there competition? Things like that.
Is there a family that you need to provide for or something like that? Because I noticed, PEDs really become an extreme factor toward the end of a professional athlete's career. As it appears, Romulus is sort of nearing that, or at the time that he needed the drugs, he may have been toward the twilight of his career.
Right.
And he needed to win. He needed to have those endorsements and to have that attention, so he went to Milo to get this drug. Professional athletes, typically as they're nearing the end of their career and their muscle mass is dropping off, or their performance isn't quite as good as they need it to be, they will then start injecting themselves with something in order to become Mark McGuire or Sammy Sosa or Barry Bonds or, whomever.
Lance Armstrong.
Definitely Lance Armstrong. But Lance may have been doing it even earlier.
The whole time.
Yeah, he's, but it's interesting that you bring up Lance Armstrong. Talk about someone, I don't know how much you know about Lance Armstrong, but talk about someone like that, because very much like Romulus and a little even like Milo, because, it is strongly believed, especially since he's basically come out and admitted it, that he was the mastermind behind this team of doped up cyclists. I mean, he kind of was the Milo as well.
Right.
So, talk about a guy who is so needs to win so badly that he is, strong arming even his team. He was live strong arming his team.
That's terrible.
I know. Yeah.
Well, ultimately, again, it has to do with internal or external locus of control. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. That we just talked about, what do I have control over? Now, we can't control a lot of these external factors, whether there's going to be a mountain I have to get my bike up, or, I don't know, the weather conditions, other people I'm competing against. I can't control that, but I can control my performance via steroids, via enhancements. And that has to do with my willingness or my beliefs in this kind of win at all costs kind of mentality.
Right. Okay. I get that.
Now, what's interesting is with Lance Armstrong, like you said, he may have started much earlier than anyone had imagined when it comes to performance enhancers. And it can be because of this slippery slope of unethical behavior. And this is an area of study in psychology that is really growing as far as discovering different reasons that everyday average Joes are kind of going down the path of unethical and what would be considered antisocial behavior, or behavior that would be considered psychopathic.
Oh, okay.
A study that was cited by the Journal of Applied Psychology found that through these simulated tests that were given to subjects, there's this aspect where if people were given incentives, basically, money, to cheat or to kind of give little white lies about their performance, they were more likely to increase those incidents of cheating. So the study is this. There were subjects in an experimental group who received 25 cents for each correct answer in the first round, $1 in the second round, and $2.50 in the third. So you can see they're increasingly getting paid more. Mm-hmm. And the gradual increase stepped up their incentive to lie to testers. So they were essentially being rewarded for bad behavior.
Okay.
They were being paid a little bit more to lie on each round.
Okay.
People in the other groups were paid either nothing or just like a flat $2.50 for each solution that was correct. So can you see that you're getting paid more per round? So if you get more correct on your responses and you're like grading yourself, you're reporting your correct responses to the tester.
Yes.
So the more that you lie about your responses being correct, the more money you're going to get.
Yeah.
So the study found that those with progressive incentives were more likely to over-report or lie on their correct answers. And they thought that the reason this could be is that basically committing increasingly unethical acts over time allows people to rationalize and almost routinize their conduct. Researchers were saying that doing something that's just a little bit worse doesn't seem so bad. So like you incrementally do something just a little bit worse than the thing before.
Yeah.
And before you know it, you're performing these egregious acts.
Okay.
So with Lance, you can think about someone that maybe started out trying out small doses of performance enhancers just to test it out, see how it did. And then
in the next race, he's like switching out urine and doing all of that. Like he's, so basically throughout his career, it just got a little worse. Totally.
And you're right, over his career, he started to use more and more. Now, I'm just conjecturing because I don't know the details of his story. Mm-hmm. But, I do know that athletes like him will actually inject himself with steroids. Are you familiar with this?
Oh, yeah.
So rather
I mean, having been a former athlete, I can tell you that while I didn't, which is probably why I'm no longer an athlete. Yes, there are absolutely athletes that either pop pills, but more likely injected themselves.
Right. So there's this self-administration of steroids versus having some kind of medical professional, although it would be unethical, some kind of medical professional who would monitor and supervise you.
But it happens. I mean,
absolutely.
Just this past week, the National Football League, in conjunction with the DEA, actually surprised 3 teams of three professional teams. They came in and did surprise drug testing and searches of the team doctors and medical assistants. So like they're looking for that kind of stuff.
Right.
Yeah, it is a pretty serious business.
Exactly.
Winning.
Exactly. So if you combine, personality characteristics, this drive to win, an inherent, already pre-existing, amazing ability. There's no lie. Lance Armstrong is already at baseline an amazing athlete. So you're taking those abilities and just superpowering them with this, drug enhancement. And then you have these additional kind of unique, perhaps, I'm not saying that he has any kind of mental, issue or anything, but you could have some elements of narcissism, some elements of win at all costs, black and white thinking, the willingness to do almost anything to win. And, that's a very unfortunate formula, forgive the pun, for developing an addiction or an overuse of steroids.
He certainly saw the benefits, but then also saw a lot of the monstrous effects of those drugs as well. He was not known for being a particularly nice person, as his teammates will attest. But which is why I say that it's maybe a little bit of both. He was both Romulus and Dr. Milo a little bit. So it's an interesting. It's a good person to bring up, Drea.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. But we can't get away from the fact that none of this would have been made possible had 2 wolves not gone missing from the Gotham Zoo. That brings us back to our red-headed security friend, John, who may have been a little bit irresponsible. Why? Because he's a redhead. And what did he do?
You got it. The guy tells me to open the locks, and next morning the wolves are gone.
Yeah, so Bullock has cornered our security friend, and he believes that he may have had something to do with the missing wolves, which then helped contribute to the serum. And sure enough, the ginger left the locks open, and the wolves went missing. Thanks a lot, Ginger security guard.
Look, he was paid a lot of money to do that.
We don't know that he was. He was, but still. It was in his nature to just do bad things anyway.
Clearly.
So let's go back to our trio of Batman, Dr. Milo, and Anthony Romulus. Romulus has taken the full-blown serum, and he begins going full-blown werewolf.
Stage 4 werewolfism.
Now, Milo basically admits, haha, you're an idiot. There's no real cure for any of this, to which Romulus responds,
You fool! There's no telling what the werewolf might do.
Hey, ask me if I care.
Can I just say, this is the first clip with a significant amount of the music. The werewolf's theme music is badass.
It is a little badass. It's not the same as your typical Batman the Animated Series episode. It's not as much orchestral score. It's more kind of like rocky.
Yeah.
Not rocky as in
No.
Adrian,
like
but
the
like
electric guitar.
Rock. Yeah, it's very almost 80s, late 80s horror rock a little bit, so it is a little cool.
The best part is when Batman squares off with Romulus as a werewolf, and the werewolf theme music and then the BTAS Batman theme music just kind of square off as well. There's that cool moment. So I don't know. I was digging the music.
It's good. It's good in this episode.
It is good.
I liked it. But Batman doesn't necessarily have to defend himself against the werewolf, because just like in Tiger, the wolf decides to go after his creator instead. He basically tears down the shack and knocks Milo off a cliff. And Milo is then taken away. The wolf disappears, and Milo is taken away by Gordon and his lot, but Milo just can't shut up.
You know, my friend, I'm innocent. They'll never convict me of a thing.
I don't know that that's true.
Well, he didn't necessarily do, it was the wolf in his eyes. Like he wasn't the one that did it.
Right, but he facilitated the crime.
Hey, he created the serum, sure, but he didn't inject Romulus. Romulus took the vial away from him and drank it both times. And he really didn't do anything, and he wasn't paid. Now, you could say that he is the one responsible for the theft of the two wolves. So at the very least, you've got that. And then you've probably also got kidnapping the Batman, But
right.
I'm not sure Batman wants anyone to know about that. You wouldn't go to court
He's not
for
gonna
kidnapping
press
the
charges.
Batman. You don't want that getting out.
Oh, man, so he's going to go free.
Yeah. Yeah, but Gordon basically says, I wouldn't bet on it. And then, you get the sense. Now, what I thought was interesting about this moment was Milo goes from looking cocky to, as the doors of the ambulance / wagon, whatever truck he's being loaded up into, as they close, his eyes actually move upward a little bit, like maybe he's a little worried. Like this whole thing was a persona that he was sort of putting on. I'm not so sure he's as confident when those doors close in that moment. It was a very subtle look.
Yeah, I noticed that too. It was creepy. I thought there was someone in the truck with him.
Yeah, I did too. And then there was no evidence of anyone in a truck with him.
Was he trying to sense the wolf?
Maybe. It's possible. But Batman is freed, of course, and he goes, he's wondering where this wolf has gone off to. And there in the distance, in the moonlight, we do in fact see a wolf. Not the wolf, but we see one of his wolf kindred spirits there in front of the moon. Just howling. And the episode goes to closing credits, and that's it.
That's the end. You get, of course, the impression that Romulus will forever be a werewolf, stage 4 werewolf, and that he'll be, kind of living like a savage in the hills of Gotham County.
Well, they don't know. They don't know for sure, but Bullock makes the point that we'll find out in 4 weeks when there's another full moon, and who knows if suddenly there's a report of a werewolf, we'll know Romulus is out there. So,
it's very, I was kind of thinking, well, he can hang out with Tigress, who is also alone. A creature of the night who lives alone. But then I realized I feel very differently about Romulus. I don't quite have the compassion and the feelings of, feeling sorry for him that I do for Tigress. I feel like Tigress was, by all means did the best with what he was given. Mm-hmm. And Romulus was a self-serving son of a bitch.
Yeah. Dogs versus cats.
Yeah.
So, as always, I like to throw into the mix some real life stories. And, you wouldn't think that there would be a whole lot of werewolfism kind of, but we've talked about steroids. We've talked about people who use steroids. I feel like we've got the real life experiences covered. But Drea, as a psychologist, as someone who deals with mental health, are you aware that there's a little thing called clinical lycanthropy?
I am aware of clinical lycanthropy.
Well, audience, are you aware that there's a little thing called clinical lycanthropy? Now, one would think, oh, what does this mean? People are becoming werewolves.
Clinical being the key word here.
Okay, so what does clinical mean in relation to clinical lycanthropy?
Meaning it's a mental health condition. It's a mental issue. It's, it derives from some kind of misidentification in the brain versus an actual physical transformation into a werewolf.
Okay, so this wouldn't apply to this story because, as we know, Romulus is actually a werewolf. But describe clinical lycanthropy a little bit.
Clinical lycanthropy is a very, very rare condition, which is characterized by someone who is experiencing a delusion that they're transforming into an animal.
So it could be any animal. It doesn't necessarily have to be a wolf. It could be, I'm turning into a giraffe.
It could be any animal, although very commonly wolves and dogs are what people tend to select as animals they're transforming into. The people who are affected by this also behave like the animal they think they've turned into, so get on all fours, try to eat out of a dog dish. It's a particular delusion. It's a type of delusion. It's a belief that's very outside of reality.
So let's talk about the criteria for this sort of thing. It's not necessarily a disorder, right? I mean, what are these people suffering from?
No, think about it like a condition or, like I said, a delusion. So think about it this way. This is not a mental health disorder. It's a very unusual syndrome that could be part of a larger
So it could have something
problem.
to do with, say, schizophrenia.
Exactly. So psychotic mood disorders, schizophrenia, substance-induced psychosis. So this would be something that, there would be an underlying mental health issue that's related to some kind of, psychotic symptom. And it's, again, particularly rare. I've never seen it. I don't know that I've talked to anyone else who's seen it, but we definitely have documentation and case studies that have talked about this condition.
Now, you've talked in the past about things in the brain, sort of neurological disorders, not just mental, but actual pieces of the brain working or not working. Is this the kind of thing that, like, maybe someone's brain is broken?
Well, we would never say that anyone's brain is broken.
Well, you wouldn't.
Well, what we would say is that, yes, there's usually some kind of neurological deficit or, issue that could be responsible for such a glaringly bizarre kind of set of beliefs, right? Mm-hmm. So lycanthropy or clinical lycanthropy is kind of umbrellaed under delusional misidentification syndromes, and those are overall syndromes that tend to have a neurological basis. They involve really strange beliefs that have to do with a person's identity. Like they think they're a different person. They think they're an object, an animal. They think they have been transformed or altered. So these delusions are, again, they tend to be very bizarre and have to do with a person's identity.
Interesting. It is a fascinating look at something that you just don't normally think of. When I think werewolf, I think the Wolfman, I think Universal movie monsters. You don't necessarily think that there is someone out there who legitimately believes that they are becoming a wolf. And
right.
It's fascinating to know that there are folks out there. And then, to be perfectly honest, it's a little fascinating to think that maybe some of them are, and we just don't believe them.
Maybe you have something going on.
That is very possible. I may, in fact, have something going on. It's been a great episode. I love that Len Wein has joined the fray as a writer for Batman the Animated Series. I'm hoping to see more episodes from him. And I'm looking forward to next week's episode because we're visiting our old friend Kyodai Ken in Day of the Samurai. So we get another samurai / ninja episode.
I'm not going to lie. I'm going to miss the couple of, we've had a couple beast-like villains / tragic anti-hero characters, and I'm going to miss them.
Drea, you will be... I'm not going to tell you anything beyond this. I will simply say you won't be missing them for long. So, we'll get into it. It won't be next week, but it might be in a couple weeks. So, keep that love of the monsters going.
Is it Killer Croc?
It is not Killer Croc.
Is it Man-Bat?
It is not Man-Bat.
Is it Catman?
Nope. But you can just keep guessing. We'll do that offline. Until then, Drea, where can folks find you online?
They can find me online on Twitter. My handle is @ArkhamAsylumDoc. I also have this thing called a website, underthemaskonline.com.
And you've also got the Arkham Sessions Twitter account, which we both run. That is @Arkham Sessions. You can also email us. We are arkhamsessions@gmail.com. And I, of course, am on Twitter @bward028. Until next week with Day of the Samurai, I'm Brian Ward.
I'm Dr. Andrea Letamendi.
And we are
the Arkham Sessions.